discuss you in closed session?
Okay, you are live.
We'll figure it out.
You're live and ready to
Huh?
go.
I didn't get any feedback until mainly tonight, so no,
No personnel tonight, just the, okay,
next Monday.
okay.
So,
Joe needs to put his mask on.
You're live and ready to go whenever
Okay.
you're ready.
put my alt tabs in here, make sure I get everything. Good. Here we go. Ready to go? Call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Weir,
All right,
Pater. Here. Morrison,
Here.
Shannon,
Here.
Morris.
Here.
Schneider, Passanello.
I don't see Martin on here, okay.
No, I'll call him for the closed session. No sense in paying for him for the whole meeting.
We're gonna get, oh, you don't have a sheet over here?
So we're good? You got Joe?
So
I
legal
got
advice
Joe.
And say here, I thought you were waiting for him.
probably
Sorry.
Okay, then we'll follow up, next item, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance.
legal consultation grants or
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Camera, really?
I know, gotta represent.
Feel free to unmute.
Okay.
So, there's no sense in starting now.
Okay.
Okay, we'll start the first agenda item. That is the, I guess, the audit report.
Evening. Thank you all for having me. If you allow me, I'd like to share my screen so that we can all kind of look at the same information that I'll be talking about. It's essentially a copy of the financial report. Can you all see that? Good, good. So before I get into the financial report, I'd like to start with the letter of communication with those charged with governance. This is a letter to the governing body of the locale of the town. And essentially, there are different aspects of this letter, but most importantly, there are some aspects to bring to your attention, mostly due to the fact that we want to make clear to you all that it is management's responsibility to prepare the financial statements and also to have a process of internal controls relevant to the fair presentation and proper preparation of the financial statements themselves. Other than that, other items to report here are minimal. We have accounting estimates that are significant to the presentation in the financial statements here, mostly related to capital assets and depreciation expense. And there's also some estimates relating to the reporting of both the pension and the other post-employment benefit liabilities, which we will talk about in just a few minutes. Not to a great extent, but just briefly, in case you all have any questions. Other items that we would report here, any difficulties encountered performing the audit, we did not encounter any difficulties. There were no misstatements that were left uncorrected. In addition, the misstatements that we did discover were very minimal and not material to the financial statements taken as a whole. We did not have any disagreements with management, and we had no other audit matters to discuss and bring to your attention at this time. So I will move forward to the financial report. And please, if you all have any questions, feel free to buzz in or however you all do it to to ask me so that we can cover those while we're in the process of going over the financial report. So the first item in the financial report I'd like to bring to your attention is our opinion. And essentially, just to reiterate the fact that management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. This includes the design, implementation, and maintenance of internal control relevant to the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements that are free from material in the statement, whether due to fraud or error. Our responsibility as auditors is to perform the audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted, and ultimately to obtain sufficient audit evidence to render an opinion on the financial statements. At the bottom of the page here, page 1, you can see the opinion there. Essentially, the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. That is what we call a clean opinion, an unmodified opinion, and that is the best opinion that we can offer to the financial statements. The next part of the financial report is management's discussion and analysis. This is a very nice, brief, summarized version and narrative of the financial condition and financial activity of the town in the fiscal year. So if you only have a few minutes to look over this, then this is where you want to be in these few pages, because it gives you a good summarized overview of the financial statements and also different items kind of on a forward-looking basis. So for those who are not familiar with government financial statements, specifically local government financial statements, essentially the financial statements are split into two sets of financial statements. The first set being the government-wide financial statements. These financial statements are reported on the full accrual basis of accounting, which is very much like a business, a for-profit business. Essentially, it shows the difference between this and other financial statements is that it shows the long-term assets and also the long-term liabilities of the town. While this is a good financial statement and one that allows the town to be compared to other entities that are as part of an investment cycle or anything like that, or portfolio. This is not necessarily a set of financial statements that is useful for you all as council members in determining what is sufficient to budget. Just because there are elements in these financial statements, this set of financial statements, that are not budgeted for. For example, capital assets depreciation, in addition to deferred items related to the pension and the OPEB. So just to kind of give you a preface, I guess, on these sets of financial statements. But as you can see, the total net position of the town at June 30, 2020 was $7.2 million. Of that amount, 5.2 was invested in capital assets. And you can see here, this is also a full accrual basis financial statement. It's the change from the end of last year to the end of FY 2020. I know we're already 7-8 months past that date, but this is reporting on that time period. So you can see here, change in net position is an increase of approximately $732,000. Now, the set of financial statements that is probably most useful to you all from a budgetary perspective is the fund financial statements. This is reported on the modified accrual basis of accounting, which only really accounts for more shorter-term items on the balance sheet, like shorter-term receivables and also shorter-term payables that the town may owe as of the balance sheet date. And as you can see here, in the general fund of the town, there was approximately $2 million of total fund balance in the general fund. Of that amount, $1.96 million was unassigned, while $6,000 was restricted for proffers, and an additional $38,500 was non-spendable because it was already encumbered and allotted to prepaid expenses. Exhibit 5 shows the revenues and the expenditures on the fund financial statement. As you can see here, total revenues was approximately $2.8 million, while total expenditures was approximately $2.6 million, leading to an excess of revenues over expenditures of $212,000, which is an increase from the prior fund balance amount of $1.79 million to the previously stated number of approximately $2 million in fund balance at year end. The next section is the notes to the financial statements. This provides a good amount of detail as it relates to what's being reported in the financial statements. So if you're curious about how something's being reported or what's being reported, this is the place to go. This provides some really good detail as it relates to the information that's being reported, and also some schedules like capital asset schedules that show the change from one year to the next. Long-term obligations, again, from one year to the next, the detail and the changes for that information. And again, the general the long-term obligations, kind of a little more descriptive narrative of what those items are. What makes up the rest of the notes really are the pension plan and the other post-employment benefit notes. This is really kind of boilerplate template stuff. It's very much in line with what the state requires to be reported by local governments. Ultimately, it does provide some good information, some good detail about how the pension liability and or asset, or OPEB liability and or asset are calculated, and the different actuarial assumptions that are taken into fact with calculating the actuarially valued pension liability and OPEB liability. Won't spend too much time on these, but if you do have any questions about these, I'm happy to answer. As you can see here, there's a schedule showing the change from the prior period to the current period for financial reporting. And as you'll see here, it's being reported a year behind, and that's accurate. Essentially what happens is the actuaries only get the information for reporting the pension and the OPEB essentially a year delayed. And so the information you see is measured as of June 30, 2019, but is for the reporting period June 30, 2020. So I'll quickly go through these so we can move forward. But again, any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. The next item I'd like to bring to your attention is Exhibit 7. This is the budget to actual schedule. It's the summarized version of budget to actual, and so you have your different categories of revenues and your different departments and categories of expenditures, and how the actual accounting or actual numbers or figures compare to the final budget and also to the original budget. So ultimately, there was revenues were in excess of the budgeted amount by $213,000, and expenditures were less than the budgeted amount by $437,000. So on the good on both sides, ultimately in excess of revenues over expenditures, variance with the budget of $651,000. These other schedules, the next few schedules are related to the pension and also the OPEB items, and again, I'm happy to answer any questions you all have related to those. Schedule 1 is a schedule of revenues, and it provides a little bit more detail in a comparison format of the actuals compared to the budget. And so if you're interested in looking a little bit more at the detail of how things are categorized, for revenues, this is the schedule. Similarly, for expenditures, Schedule 2, as you can see here, it's a little more detailed, gives your departments and also the natural classification of the expenditures within that department and how they compare to the budget for the year. So a couple of pages there. And finally, additionally, our report on internal control over financial reporting as required by government auditing standards. As part of government auditing standards, we're required to assess the internal control environment to assess to see whether or not there are any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in the control processes that we encounter as a result of our assessment. And if we encounter any of those, we report those here. But as you can see, I'm happy to report that we did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in our assessment process. So essentially, that's the financial report in a nutshell. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have at this time.
Bob?
Just to confirm, I read this earlier. We're not showing any weaknesses or strengths currently, and our internal controls are acceptable, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
They are acceptable. Obviously, there are conditions related to the size of the town, the size of staff, that prohibit there be a significant level of separation of duties. But there are certainly oversight measures in place to help mitigate the risk of any fraud or other erroneous activities for financial reporting purposes.
All right. From an audit standpoint, or from an auditor's standpoint, two-part question on carryover or surplus funds from last year. A lot of that comes as a result of using CARES Act funds for acceptable expenditures in the last fiscal year and then carrying the savings forward. First off, would it be your suggestion that in a budget amendment in the third quarter, we clean up the books for next year by adding that in, that total amount in as carryover from the prior fiscal year and amending to that number?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if there are carryovers that you all would like to budget expenditures for, I think that would be an appropriate action. However, I think also if there are revenues in place that allow you all to budget for the current expenditures as they are stated, that may be something to consider as well as to not necessarily increasing the budget by the carryover.
I think no. I don't want to carry existing line items with the carryover. I want to, which leads to part two of it. I suspect that the revenues are going to be sufficient to cover the expenditures for the year. But do you have any suggestions for creating, for lack of a better term, a lockbox for those funds for CIP projects, or is that beyond your scope?
Well, I think that it's ultimately a decision of the town council to make on that. But certainly there are we see all the time there be some committed fund balances that the governing body decides to commit to a certain purpose, and so I certainly think it's within the council's right, and also probably good to commit some fund balances to capital projects if that's what you want to commit the fund balances to.
I'm good.
Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick one, sir. Mr. Lupton, thank you for your presentation. Is the auditor, Mr. Mayor, the person who indicated, I remember in the past, indicated to us what percentage of the reserves we keep, and how do we look as far as the percentage that we keep in reserves? Or is that from VML? that recommends a percentage?
You know, it's again, I think it really, you know, it's something that I guess you would want to determine what you want to maintain as far as a commitment for. But generally speaking, a good measure of kind of your unreserved or uncommitted fund balance to see if it's enough to cover, I guess, you know, current expenditures, is to look at your unassigned fund balance as a percentage of total expenditures for the year. And so the unassigned fund balance was, as I mentioned earlier, $1.96 million. If we look at that number as a percentage of total expenditures for fiscal year 2020, you're at 76%. And so essentially what that means, and I know this is kind of a worst case scenario, absolute worst case, essentially what that means is for 76% of the year, you have enough fund balance to cover any expenditures for 3/4 of the year, essentially, without collecting any other revenues. That is a very, I guess, strong reserve position. You know, generally speaking, we recommend that there be at least 15 to 20% of unassigned fund balance as compared to the general fund expenditures for the fiscal year. So it is certainly beyond that amount, quite significantly.
So thank you for that explanation. So normally you would recommend 15 to 20, and right now we are at 27.
Right now you're at 76%.
Well, at 76, but it's 27 as far as the reserves, correct?
Well, I guess I'm not sure necessarily. We might be speaking about a couple of different things as it relates to reserves, but what I think of as quote unquote reserves is your unassigned fund balance, meaning the fund balance that the town has that is not committed or restricted or non-spendable in any way as of a certain date or as of June 30, 2020. And as I mentioned, there's 1.96 million of unassigned fund balance.
Oh, so the 76
Liquid assets?
is correct.
Those are liquid assets? And what page of the report is that on?
So if you
the
go to
third
Exhibit 3, and that's page 10.
Can you bring that up again?
So I think my understanding is you're recommending 15 to 20%, and right now we are at 76.
Where the recommendation would be correct.
Correct. So yeah, you see here this $1.96 million is your unassigned fund balance, which essentially is your assets minus your liabilities. And so, kind of as a good measure of proper reserves, I guess you can take that number as a percentage of your total expenditures for the year. And as you can see, total expenditures 2.6 million approximately, and fund balance 1.96. So that's a pretty sizable reserve as it relates and is compared to total expenditures.
Can I jump in here?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And historically, if I recall, that number has been higher at different points in time. So this is not out of the ordinary that we have such a high level of fund balance, correct?
You know, I've only worked with the town for about the last 3 years, but during that time, I think it's been around that amount. I don't recall specifically what the FY19 financials showed, but this year there was an increase of $211,000 to that fund balance, and so yeah, I would say it probably hovers right around that amount at least for the last few years.
But bottom line is we're in a good financial position to weather any storm, for lack of a better term.
Right. Yeah, I think the unassigned fund balance is sufficient to cover a good amount of expenditures for the general fund.
And I guess to Bob's question, because that's one of the things that we had some confusion about, Mike, is it's unassigned, but it's in different kind of media, right? I mean, it's medium.
of exchange. Some of it's in cash, some of it might be in CDs, but is it all liquid? I guess that's the question.
No.
Sorry about that. So essentially, you know, on this same exhibit here, you can see cash and cash equivalents of $1.6 million. That's your liquid. Those are your liquid assets. 329,000 in investments. I don't
That's
recall
the
off the top of my head
That's
what that
VML
represents.
Vaco, Mike. That's the VML Vaco investment.
Okay, that's it. That's the VIP.
Yeah.
And so essentially that has a longer maturity period. It's a 1 to 3 year bond maturity period, and so it's not liquid as it relates to presentation of cash and cash equivalents.
Right. And then the others are receivables, so,
Correct.
yeah, got it.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other
Mike,
questions?
If I might, I just say, hey, Mike, thank you for offering to do this for us. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
It's kind of a learning curve for some of us, and it's really very helpful. And of course, now I'll go back and read it. 'Cause
There you go. Well, I appreciate you all having me, and if you do have any other questions throughout the year, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to help and try to answer those for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You all have a good evening.
That's it.
You too. I guess we're ready for the next item. We have the budget update. We did,
So we've got the budget update in the packet. And this is up to February 16th. So we have gotten some meals tax since then, but we won't have that incorporated today. And then the only other thing that I will mention is that the budget amendments for the police department have been included in here. So if you go to packet page 4, you will see there is now the salary and wages bonus and then salary and wages recruitment bonus. So those two have been added in there. And the reason why that's in there sooner rather than later is so that they can move forward with processing those bonuses. And then we have amended it on QuickBooks, but it didn't make it into this packet. They got into the agenda for the changes to the admin side for Kim's salary.
okay, anybody have any questions?
I'm not hearing.
Is somebody talking?
Roberto, it sounds like. I heard the
Go ahead, Roberto.
Hey, I'm here. So this report, I highlighted two line items. The sales tax receipts. The reason why I highlighted that is because I have reached out to Prince William County. They have been delayed on their end to submit our deposits. In fact, they had not processed fully through the November deposit. I apologize, the October deposit. I was informed that will be coming through to us, but what I did do is create a receivable invoice so we can allocate for the funds that will be coming. So that right there reads what we would have as of November 30th. This is the report that is delayed. The county had a lot of turnover. They're having issues constantly on getting these reports to us, but that is something I'm starting to follow up even more, just because I'm hoping to avoid any miscommunication with Mr. Velasquez at the county going forward.
Roberto, did they give you a reason for the delays, or are they blaming COVID, or what's the story?
To be very honest, they stated that they had the person in charge of our account let it slip. In fact, that he is actually changing our point of contact in order to get this resolved. Because the person that was in charge of our account let it slip, and so he's moving our account to another representative in the county.
Who's our contact in the tax to the budget office?
The person I discussed with is Mr. Paul Velasquez when it comes to the sales tax. Yes, sir. I see you, Joe.
Hey, Roberto, how you doing, buddy? Hey, so a couple of things. Did I hear you say that you've booked this, but we haven't received the funds yet? Did I hear
Yeah.
that?
So what happened was that we received a deposit. They don't send me a receipt until the deposit shows up, and they'll send me a receipt stating what it's for. When I noticed that they had sent me the receipt, it stated that was actually for November. And the last time I had in my records in QuickBooks, we had a September payment. So in essence, that's what drew a red flag to me when I reached out to Paul, asking what happened to the October, or was there a miscommunication? Did you mean this to be October instead of November? That's when he came back to me and was fessed up that basically there was a miscommunication on their end, and he had approved October's funds, and it was just never processed by the representatives at our account that were holding our account. So the number is true. What I wanted to do is just to reflect it as a receivable. So I basically created an invoice so it is there. But once it shows up, it is there.
Got it. Okay. And this is above where we should be targeted wise for the year.
Correct.
If I understand this correctly, they've collected the sales tax, but they just haven't remitted it to us, so that while the county has their funding, they're simply for some reason, and I suspect I know what it is, withholding ours because they haven't completed the processing yet?
Correct. So the personnel that approves the ACH deposits approved it, but the ball was dropped in that process to be initiated to be submitted to us.
Is it typically 1 month behind instead of 4?
Typically it's about 2 to 3 months. But when COVID hit, Mr. Velasquez was actually new to the department, and he had informed me that when COVID hit, they had lost 3 or 4 senior employees that had done this for years. They left abruptly, and there was never a training process during the change. So it has caused a lot of issues, not just with us, but with many other localities. Okay. Chris, would you want to talk about an update on the proposed draft budget, or?
We'll have it at the next work session.
The proposed draft budget, just to give you guys an update on that, Chris and I are pretty close to finalizing what we will present to council. And it's called a draft because we will definitely have work sessions to discuss it. I'm sure every council has thoughts on concerns on how they want the money or the budget to work out this coming year. But we are pretty close to doing that, finalizing that to present, I'm hoping in March, so we can begin the process of holding work sessions to come to a final budget for next year.
Roberto? Oh, shit.
Thanks, Roberto.
Roberto, what's our timeline for dispersing those fire funds monies? And do we have those in hand?
We have received those funds in hand. We do have it. As far as the disbursement, I will let our town manager discuss that because I believe he did hold some meetings pre-COVID with a person in the department that was in charge of it. Chris, I don't know. You are probably better to answer this question.
The answer is no. We're no closer to spending it than we were last meeting when you talked about it. Just everything else is hopped in front of the line.
Any more questions for Roberto? We flip through all this stuff. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, administrative staff retention bonuses.
So this came up at the last regular meeting, and this is actually helpful that we're already looking at the budget. So if you look at packet page 2, you can see that for cigarette tax as well as meals tax, we are substantially higher than we need to be. So Roberto and I had suggested if there was going to be retention bonuses similar to the PD, so 1,000 per person, you could use the funds from the overage or the it's trending higher in cigarette tax and meals tax, and then there was surplus from last fiscal year. So those are all 3 locations that you could pull those funds if council was interested.
How much are we talking, Chris?
If it was 1,000 a person, 4,000 total.
Okay. That's a good idea. We were suggesting to take it from. Yeah.
And without objection, I would direct the town manager to bring that forth with a budget amendment and plan for next meeting. Actually, we need to publish. No, you're right, we don't. But we're going to have to publish something else, I think. Don't have any other changes we got to make?
Nope.
We're going to wait till the third quarter.
We can talk about that stuff too. So is it, do we want to utilize one of those funds or spread it amongst the 3? What are we thinking?
I think you and Roberto has the answer.
Okay. I mean, we can come up with our recommendation to just make it easy.
You know the trends.
Okay.
Yeah, your recommendations with working with the finance committee, that should be appropriate.
All right. Yes, sir. Joe, did you have anything? Hold on.
Done?
Go ahead, you're on.
I was just gonna add to that, you guys make your recommendation, we can talk about it on Thursday at 2 o'clock.
Okay, next agenda item, personnel policy update.
All right, sorry, I got to get all this stuff. Yes, so this is what I have passed out in front of you, and Joe, I dropped it off at your house. So it's, yep. So there's just a couple things that we need to address. So if you go to, and this will be in the agenda packet for the regular meeting, it's just we didn't have enough time to do it. One of the things was in the previous personnel policies, we had defined what non-exempt employees were to include the town clerk and the deputy clerk and things like that. So we amended that definition just to the employee entitled to receive overtime compensation under Fair Labor Standards Act, period. That's end of discussion. And then if you go to page 9, I believe. Yes, so if you go to page 9 in section D that talks about overtime, the town has been moving forward with the understanding that it was 80 hours per pay period when individuals would get overtime. So this is specific to the police department. So what we did is just went ahead and changed that to 80 hours per pay period instead of 40 hours per work week. So that was just one of the changes that we changed with that. That's how we've been operating, and the police department does not have a general orders while it relates to overtime or the holiday and leave. So then if you go to page 10, holidays and leave, I just took out the probationary salaried employees, just so this way, and we include all employees. And then on page 10, when it comes to holidays and leave, it just better defines it, because it was, if you read the previous definition, it is a little confusing, and then it had a separate one for police. So what I did is I just went ahead and basically did 4 lines instead of that 1 paragraph to just clean it all up and be very, very clear as to what it would be. So these are my recommended changes that we make next week, and then I will continue to update the personnel policy. In reviewing some other localities, we are very behind, but I think these are the ones that we need to address sooner rather than later, and then we can correct other stuff at a later date. And we will be discussing some more different items about this later on in closed session.
So did you pretty much get a blessing for the changes through our legal counsel?
And that's what I do need to talk to Martin about these on Wednesday. So that's the other thing is, that's why we'll wait until next week before we do it. Because so I'd like to report on it, have these in the agenda and report on it that we've got Martin's blessing.
But we are discussing this with Martin tonight, correct?
He could probably stay on for this, yes.
Well, it's in here.
It's one of the items, yes, but I was intending the other item to be the focus, but I'm sure he'd be willing to participate in both.
I do have some questions and concerns about it. Is it best to save it for closed session?
Yes.
Thank you.
The reason why I say it's probably safe to save for closed session is because the majority of these changes deal with compensation. So that's something that we can discuss in closed session, and I think we should.
I prefer that too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions on the employee policies? Okay, we'll move on to the DMV Select.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I apologize.
Hold on. Let me unmute you.
Chris, you made mention that the concern in the police department in relation to the orders, what was it that you said they don't have?
Yes, so in the way that the personnel policy reads, if you go through it, it mentions that this document, it provides personnel instructions, compensation, stuff like that, but if there's a general orders from the police department or a specific police department order, it doesn't supersede it for the police department. So if there was an order in the general orders for it, then we wouldn't have to worry about this one because that's what they would be operating under. So like if, for example, if you go to page 10 again, you can actually see where one of the things I struck, the last section, it even says, for police officers on shifts, refer to SOP. So if there was an SOP relating to holidays and leave, then we wouldn't have to amend this, but there's not one. So that's just why we need to do it.
Well, how do we ensure that the police standing orders and, in essence, our employee manual, they correlate?
So that'll be one of the tasks that I need to do to make sure that when I update the personnel policy, that I ensure that when we're talking about the compensation, overtime, stuff like that, that they jive, that they, one doesn't contradict the other.
I'm just thinking through it, that if that needs to be revamped too.
Absolutely. Like, just for example, Middleburg's personnel policy is 108 pages, and ours is 27. There's certain, they've got 3 pages on certain stuff that we've got 1 paragraph on. So that's just something that it's greatly needed for us to go through. And that's where, just in going through this, as I review certain stuff and make notes, then I can always go back and check. Now that I have the general orders in my office, just so I can reference and, cross-reference, and that's one of the things that I found. So.
And do you know, and maybe if Chief Lands is online, if when was the last time our general orders was updated?
I do not know that, Chief. Do you know when the last time general orders were updated? Oh, hold on, I think I got this one on mute.
Hold on, Chief. Hold on.
All right, Chief, go ahead.
Go ahead.
The entire general orders were gone over in December of 2016. That's when they were updated completely, brought into basically an accreditation standard. Since then, they're updated as needed per new policies or changes, like anything that comes up down the General Assembly or anything that we need to add.
So in your opinion, Chief, do you think we need to do anything as far as revamping or just go through our general orders, or do you think it's sufficient as is?
I think we have a very solid general orders. It's pretty much a cookie cutter one given out by the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police for accredited agencies. I think they're good. There's just things that that like Chris said, him and I need to get together and make sure they jive together with the town's policy. Currently, I think the way it works, or that Chris and I found out, was that it just says this, anything that has to do with this, refer to the town policy, which is why the town policy needs to be cleaned up a little bit. And Chris and I will work together on that.
Chris, outside of the compensation item concerning 40 hours per period or versus 80 hours per period, have you identified any other major areas that you see any conflict?
A lot. I mean, it's, yes, there's a lot of different areas that need to be addressed. I mean, if I just go through this, there's certain ones that you can point out. For example, just the holiday leave and everything that we mentioned, it doesn't even follow all the state's holidays that we need to update that, because the state has recently updated holidays. When we're talking about different like FLSA, when we're talking about Fair Labor Standard, all those different ones, the rules have since changed, so we need to make sure that everything's in accordance with it. So not only is it one of those where it's like what is referenced in here may no longer be valid, so we've got to go back through and verify it. That's one of the big ones, is just we need to make sure that, because this was done 10 years ago, or 11 years ago now. It was 2010, and the only thing that was added in 2014 was the social media policy, which is already nearly out of date completely. So that's something else that we're going to have to go through. Like I said, I can go into more detail of all the different ones, but like I said, really the main one, which we can talk about in more detail in the closed session, was just we needed to address these now, and then we can go ahead and take care of the other ones shortly, but it's not as necessary to do it immediately.
Since you and the chief have reviewed both of them, the general orders and or personnel policy, are there any that strikes you now that we need to act on that may put the town in a liable position?
The ones that I'm recommending today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else with questions? And I'm assuming that in the discussions, you'll determine what precedents the documentation will hold, so that if there is a conflict, one's going to be a higher order than the other?
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll follow suit with what other people do. So yes, what we'll have to do is just clearly define the hierarchy of what document basically is the law of the land, and then which one is just kind of a supplemental document to it. So we'll establish that.
Okay. Okay, now we'll move on to the DMV Select.
Okay, so the DMV Select, this is something that actually Kim worked up, just because I know we've talked a lot about dollar amounts and everything else, and it's just kind of complicated to understand where we're talking about how we think we would generate funds. So yes, yeah, Joe, that's what we're talking about. So what I've done is this is what Kim provided, so you can just see registration for 1 year for a standard car. It would cost the customer $40.75, and the town would get $2.04. And similar to that, if it was a 2-year, it costs the customer $81.50. And this is just for a standard car. There's other factors at play, emissions and 2-year, 3-year, stuff like that. But then the town would get $4.08. And then I've included the same thing for titling a $10,000 car. The town would get $25.29. For a $20,000 car, it'd be $47.79. And then you go down to like a truck, so just a $30,000 truck, could be a used truck for $30,000, but still it's just titling a truck, would be $71.04. And then you can see this is based on her years of experience. I believe she emailed everybody all of the experience that she has, which is ample, which we're lucky to have her. That is one where you can see where some transactions would take 10 minutes at the most for registration renewal, 15 to 10 minutes for just a small titling, and then 15 minutes for some of the bigger ones. What I also did is for a $48,000 DMV employee, full benefits, so that's a family health insurance plan, that's VRS, that's insurance, taxes, everything, the whole shebang, it'd be $36.54 an hour. So I just did an example of 1 hour here where if there was a titling, a truck, a 1-year registration renewal, a 2-year registration renewal, and then a titling of a $10,000 car and a $20,000 car. That would be 55 to 65 minutes worth of work, and then that would be $150.24 in revenue generated. So that would be 4.1 hours of that full-time employee's work. Now, one of the things that we also have mentioned before, just kind of in passing and stuff, but we have discussed with the headquarters, DMV headquarters, and they would send us supplement titles, so that would be additional work. So if it was slow when we started out, just like Dumfries, where they were generating $6,000 a month, with that supplemental work, we could do something very similar. So we could easily generate the money just from that supplemental work. However, I think if we had supplemental work plus a drop box, so then individuals fill out all the paperwork, basically the only thing they don't do is pay. They fill out all the paperwork and put it in a drop box, and in Remington, they basically know it'll be processed within 3 days. What'll happen is then they contact the person who dropped off all the paperwork, and they say, hey, your total's going to be $40.75. You can come between the 4 and 4:30, or however, if there's an open appointment slot, then they can go ahead and put them in there. So that we have some flexibility with. And then the same thing is out-of-state dealership work. That's another one where it does restrict in-state dealership. However, Remington has partnered with one out-of-state dealer that is a high-end dealer that they get basically titling certain vehicles that their commission for it is more than $100 a piece. So when you're looking at that, that means that if they title one vehicle where the commission's $100, that's 3 hours, and it only takes a couple minutes to do that. So I think this kind of just paints the picture where we're coming from, that we think just between walking in off the street and the commissions that we would generate, plus the headquarters work that they could send us, the Dropbox work that we could get for people that might not be able to make it within business hours, but they could do it before or after work, and then the out-of-state dealership, it's more than enough. But what I can also do is we have put as requested by council, we put out for citizen input. I'm sure you guys saw on Facebook and the website, we did the Survey Monkey to get feedback. And with that, we had, I'm pulling it up now, so we had 16 people that said that they reviewed the presentation, and it was 12 of those said that they supported a DMV, and then we had 4 people that did not support the DMV. Amongst those people that provided answers, because I had a section in there that anybody that had certain questions, what did they want to have answered? Nobody really had answers, but they did have statements, so I'll just go through some of those. One person said increased traffic is not sustainable in the center of town. However, I just go back to the presentation. We're talking about 6 to 12 cars an hour max. Maximum, we would see 6 to 12 cars an hour. Minimum 1 to 4. So I mean, it's not ridiculous is not the DMV customer service where people are coming in and out. It's not a turnstile. Another person said that they feel that another location would work better, an empty storefront. However, that's not an option for us. We don't have an empty storefront, and for us to lease space to then offer it, then it would be cost prohibitive, and that wouldn't happen. And this is also with DMV is really trying to partner with local businesses in the future, just because we have an established system and our infrastructure is set up to be able to handle this. Then the positive ones, some people said, no, it sounds like reasonable upfront costs and a helpful service. A bunch of people didn't have any questions, so they just put no. And then the other one, actually we got two recently, one today and one this weekend. One person said, no questions. I've utilized the DMV Select office located in Fairfax City for many years. It's always been a great experience. I'm wholeheartedly in favor of the town of Haymarket becoming a DMV Select site. And then the other person said it would be very good for the town of Haymarket to have their own DMV Select. So you've got some for, some against, but that's just based on the individuals that left feedback. Everybody else, just do you support it or do you not? It was 75% of people supported it. We also mentioned at the business roundtable, something that we think that we could do is basically partner with the different businesses and get, a stack of 100 coupons for Cupcake Heaven for 50% off a cupcake if you buy one or something like that, and we can hand those out. And the reason why I say that's important is because this goes on what Joe was talking about, is that how can we track them from the DMV to a restaurant? Well, if they're going to use a buy one, get one 50% off coupon, or, Dog's Day Out, whatever, so different coupons like that, if those business owners are willing to partner with us and say, we can say, hey, we passed out your 100 coupons, and within 2 weeks they say, hey, we got 70 of them, or we got 50 of them, then we know how many people went from the DMV Select to that place of business. So I think that's another one that would help us, if we're looking back at the end of the year to say, well, hey, not only did we generate X amount from the DMV commissions, but this is how much meals tax, business license, and other stuff these places brought in. Because we brought it up at the business roundtable too, that people mentioned the only reason they went to Remington and knew about Remington was because of the DMV Select. They went there, and then of course every time they go there, then they go to the old pharmacy and get their milkshake, or that's a routine. They go to the DMV Select, get their stuff taken care of, and then go get some food or lunch. So that's just something that, they mentioned in the business roundtable, and everybody was supportive in the business roundtable. I didn't hear anybody hesitate saying too much traffic or anything. Yes, sir.
Chris, you've done a lot of work here. I just have one question, and maybe Bob or Joe can respond to this, because I'm sure Bob's looked into it. Even with this is all best case. This is best case, I think. The figures you come up with is not best case.
This is just random. This is if we did these, and just like I mentioned, if this was done in a 3-hour period, we would still have an hour that employee could do other stuff.
I guess my question, and Bob, this may be more directed toward you, because I know you've looked at this. Given the cost of construction, at what point would we break even? And the reason I asked that's one question I was asked. Talk to people in my subdivision. They love the idea. They really love the idea. Traffic was brought up. I told them I really didn't think that would be an issue, personally. But that was the question I had, is at what point, best case, would we actually break even, and where we're actually starting to make a couple of dollars when we figure out everything?
The answer would be less than 2 years.
2 years.
Less than 2 years.
I'm going to be real conservative here.
That's fine. I mean, I've gotten multiple sources, localities, DMV, people who've worked at DMV Selects for 10 plus years. We're looking at about, especially.
It's $35 35 hours a week mandatory, right?
It is $35 a week mandatory.
35 hours. 35 hours minimum.
That's minimum.
Yeah. Because I don't want to sound like I'm opposed to it. I'm not opposed to it. Mm-hmm. I just want to know where the break-even point is. It was comforting to realize that we actually did pretty good at the end of 2020 on our budget. And this would be, I think Joe and Bob, I think we all pretty much have the same questionnaires, a good break-even point. Again, I'll say it, I'm for it. I like the idea. If we can afford it.
Quick,
I'll put it that way.
quick back of the envelope without putting a whole lot of thought into it and being very conservative. Without question, I think we could recover it in a year. I think it's likely recoverable in 6 months, maybe even less. It depends on the volume. But that's the part that
Question we don't
we're not
know.
going to know. What's the volume? I feel comfortable that we could do it within a year. I probably even suspect we could do it within 6 months without too much issue.
Joe, you have a
But-
comment?
That's not really my hang-up on it.
Thank
but-
you.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, so I haven't done the math, but I did take a quick look at this, and it might be nice to just provide some kind of a range at the last meeting. Like a low, medium, high projection based on some of these different permutations that you're working on. That might allay some of the concerns. I do think that there is a very strong likelihood, Steve, that we could break even sooner rather than later. That's
Okay.
just my gut on it. I haven't really run the numbers, though. And just for information, this is shown at 5% commission. Actually, it'll be 4.5% for the first 500,000. This only kicks in after the 500,000. So it might be a little bit low, these numbers, just a little bit, only a 0.5%, but just so we know that. I think what we need to do, this really is a pilot program, right? Essentially, we're gonna test it out and see how it works. So we're making some investments. We're going to be using some other funds that we have available to make those investments, like the sunk costs that I talked about at the last meeting. For me, the concern was the operating. But if we're going to be getting some monies from DMV or some work from DMV, that's a positive. That really helps us with that operating cost until we get to the point where things are built up and we become more known for the DMV. Just getting back to the sunk cost, I mean, those are not really perishable. We'll be able to use some of those investments anyway, so that's okay. The thing I heard about some of the complaints on the traffic side, just to allay some fears, we are going to continue to use a reservation system, correct? Okay, so that will help regulate the traffic, and if it's only you say up to 6 cars in an hour, that really is nothing when you think about it. So the upside for me seems to be stronger than the downside. I mean, everything's a risk, but I think what we have to recognize is this is, as you know, to Chris's presentation, this is a revenue generator. This is the hope of being a generator that'll certainly outweigh the investment that we make in it, and going forward too. So that's the way I think we have to look at it, more of an investment rather than an expense. So that's my thoughts.
Tracy Lynn?
Get this to go off, sorry. I would also like to remind everybody that we have a year review, right? So we can certainly do this. Again, I also agree with you, Joe, that it's an investment, and we have that opportunity to review and see where we are, and hopefully we'll have recouped within that timeframe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, and we can put assessment points in there to reevaluate this. Definitely do it in incremental stages on the initial investment, like the first window that we put in. We could piggyback that on to a situation to keep this open by being able to use COVID money to create a window in which we keep this blocked off, yet we still have accessibility to the town through that window, and we double utilize that window as both, just by only like initially having 2 visits a hour for DMV, while we have the other visit time strictly for Haymarket activity. So there's all kinds of things.
Lessons are investment.
Joe, you have a question?
No, I just wanted to piggyback on what you and Tracy Lynn said, and that's correct. It's a pilot project. We need to have periods of assessment. My question is, built-in periods, and let's face it, Roberto is going to be watching this every month. So the question is, when do we get the funds? Is it a 1-month lag? Is it a 2-month lag? Do you have any idea when that happens? Because initially, we won't be seeing anything on the first month or 2, perhaps, so we shouldn't get discouraged by that. But then that's after that point, then we should start seeing the revenue stream in. I don't know, but I'll leave it to you guys to figure out when those payments are made.
Samir. I think this whole time I've been pressing the wrong mute button. Yeah, just noticed that. Man, it took me 2 years.
It's not Jamaican.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think I've already expressed my support for this this visionary plan. I'm just waiting for you guys to catch the bug. Chris, this individual that we're looking at employing will be employed to the town. For now, especially during the startup period when things go slow, I assume you already have a list of projects that this individual could be working on, whether it be it's planning, it's financing, it's the town clerk, it's stuff that has been there all along that we need to accomplish, but you just don't have the manpower to do it. Do you have 2 months, 3 months worth of work for this person to, just in case, things start out pretty slow? I'm just asking because I know for one of the first things we did as a council was we put together this action list. We prioritized it, and you guys have been working on it. The staff has been working on it. Do you have something like that in place?
Yes. So one of the other things that I was just going to mention, how I foresee this position. As you all know, this is something I've had a conversation with Kim. I envision this person as also being a deputy town clerk. So what they would do is Kim would be the DMV manager as well as the town clerk. Her priority would be the town council work session and the town council regular meeting. Then you would have the full-time DMV employee that their main priority would be the DMV office, learning all the ins and outs from Kim, and then would also be the ARB and Planning Commission clerk. So what would happen is she or the individual would be able to get trained by Kim over the next couple years, and then when Kim is ready to retire in 4, 5, 6 years,
And Kim ain't leaving.
whenever that may be, then, so this is also a development project.
That's really
You
good.
will see in the budget, we actually have allocated the salary of this individual. 2/3 would come from the DMV because we believe that 65 to 70% of the job would be DMV related. However, we also have about $14,000, which would be about 30% taken from the administration, because we do think that this individual will be the deputy clerk to help out with ARB, with planning, and this way it also lessens the load for Kim from having to come to every single meeting, staying here overnight, all hours of the night when we have long meetings, and just doing it multiple times a month. So I think this is also just, not only do we have plans to help out for the next 2 months, but I envision this as actually more of like a 5 to 6 year plan, that then instead of like the wheels falling off if one person were to retire or leave or whatever, this is actually cross-training, and we can continue moving forward with, just we hire another capable person to kind of fill that next role, and then we just keep the train moving. So yes, we have all that incorporated and ready to go, and I think it'll be great.
Good. So from council, what is it that you're looking for from council, whether it be tonight or Monday night?
Basically, like Mayor said, we are moving forward with that COVID window. It has now been since November, before Thanksgiving, that we have not had anybody be able to come in and just grab a newspaper or a magazine or ask us questions. They'll knock every so often, or somebody's lost and they don't know where to go, so they'll knock until somebody answers. But we really haven't been able to service the public, so we have looked at installing that window in that vestibule in Emily's office. So that's something that basically, as long as you guys are okay with, I've gotten pretty far down the list, so I just need to, without objection, to put that window in. And then after that, basically next week, just to be able to move forward with Barry and DMV and say, hey, we're ready to go ahead and go. Let's get the contract stuff together, and then we can start advertising for that position and start looking at different applicants with the intent of, this is somebody that I expect to be a deputy town clerk as well, at majority DMV, but also, a deputy town clerk as well. So that will take some time, I think, to find that right balance. But that's kind of what I'm looking for. And then once we can get that individual hired and the paperwork from DMV, then I'm hoping we can, be able to move forward pretty quick.
So you have gotten the directive for the COVID window?
I have not.
Mr. Mayor, is there anything formal that we need to do?
No, there isn't. It's under cost for his authorization to pay for it.
Let's do it.
So you have received directive?
Yes,
As
sir.
of 2 seconds ago.
All right.
You good, Mr. Morris? Just, I have a quick comment.
Well, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Having Kim is a big plus with her experience.
Absolutely.
We don't have to start at ground zero in that respect, which is a plus.
Any more comments? You have enough information to move forward?
I believe so. And like I said, I will get some stuff situated. And I'll also present this so for the regular meeting, just in case we have some citizen feedback in addition to what we've already received. They'll just be able to look at all this and continue.
Okay, on that note, we'll move on. I need a motion for closed session.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move that the town council convene in closed session to discuss the following, as permitted by Virginia Code 2.23711A1, a personnel matter involving assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the town, specifically dealing with the police overtime, as well as permitted by Virginia Code sections 2.23711A7, consultation with legal counsel or briefing by staff members or consultants pertaining to, and 2.23711A8, consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, both relating to a zoning determination and zoning matter.
Got a motion and second for closed session? Guess that goes up for vote, right?
Weir,
Aye.
Pater,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes.
Shannon,
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Passanello,
Passanello voting on going into closed session. Can you repeat that?
Yes.
Martin on the line.
Yes.
Want to go for 5 minutes then?
Yeah, if you guys want 5 minutes, just so I can get Martin on the phone.
Okay, 5-minute break.
I'm tired, trust me.
Are you still sharing that screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
okay, you guys are live, and your mic should also be on now.
It is. Mr. Mayor, I move that the council certify that in the closed session just concluded, nothing was discussed except the matter or matters specifically identified in the motion to convene in closed session and lawfully permitted to be discussed in closed session under the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as cited in that motion.
So moved.
Okay, got a motion and a second from Steve. So, vote please.
Weir,
Aye.
Pater,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes.
Shannon.
Yes.
Morris. Yes. Passanello.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, without objection, I would have the town direct the town attorney to proceed as discussed with respect to the BZA appeal.
Okay. Make sure that that gets taken
So
care of.
moved.
Required for a directive, but make sure that gets taken care of, town manager. And to finalize,
I make.
Bob beat out, so, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.